Hello, my name is Julie, and today I am going to be reading books that are similar to my favorite book of all time, Bunny by Mona Awad. Technically, Bunny and Pride and Prejudice I have tied as my favorite book of all time just because they're so different. I read them such at different times, and like Pride and Prejudice is such a beloved book. I believe I first read this in May of 2020 and it was very transformative for me. I read this specifically because it was Kayla from Books and Lala's best book of 2019. I had never really read horror before and it completely changed how I saw horror and my expectations of what I could get out of horror, what horror can do and what it could be about. This is about our main character Samantha, who is in a creative writing MFA program and she is struggling to write. And Samantha is the only one in her year who is not part of this small group of girls. They're obsessed with each other, they're constantly touching each other, they kind of operate as one unit and they call each other Bunny. And Samantha is in turns hating them and obsessing over them. And she eventually gets invited to their smut salon to read their work together, and things sort of escalate from there. This is a literary horror. I just love the themes here, and I loved the feeling I had while reading it. How disoriented I was, how we're not really sure how much of it is real. And I think that this book gave the right amount of answers. This book is also about the creative process and writing specifically, and like how your creations can impact you. And one of the things that also hit me the hardest is how it is about loneliness. It's one of the very few books that I have ever annotated. Oh wow, I just turned to a page that says lonely, I'm so lonely in full caps. So I would love to read more books that are like it to see if I get a 5-star. And I am going to be doing that in 3 different ways. I am going to be getting a recommendation from the internet. I am going to be getting a recommendation from the source that I got the book from, who is Kayla. And I'm going to be getting a recommendation from the author herself. Let's start off with the internet. I filmed this clip months and months ago, but let's see what I find. Bunny by Mona Awad. I bet I've read a bunch of them. Okay. I would have expected 2 of these books for sure. Boy Parts by Eliza Clark. My Year of Rest and Relaxation, which I read and did not love. I have yet to love an Otesha Moshfegh book. We have Big Swiss by Jen Began. And then the other one was A Certain Hunger. So I know that that has something vaguely to do with cannibalism. Oh, we have the other Otesha Moshfegh books. Oh my goodness. I Who Have Never Known Men, I absolutely adored. Cleopatra and Frankenstein. I have been meaning to pick that one up. The Secret History. Am I ever gonna read that book? I don't know. I know a lot of people really like it. I hated The Goldfinch. Our Wives Under the Sea, I liked. Yellow Face is one of my favorite books that I read this year. Tender as the Flesh is fantastic. If We Were Villains is one of my favorites. Mother Thing, one of my favorite horrors. Earthlings, I have been meaning to get to, very vaguely, and The Virgin's Suicide. Lots to think about. There's also a specific website that I used to use back in the day called What Should I Read Next? And so I'm gonna see what books come up if I type in Bunny. Slow Days, Fast Company, The World of Flesh in LA by Eve Babbitts. Again, A Certain Hunger. We have the Journals of Sylvia Plath. We got Heaven. I think I almost read that once. Severance by Ling Ma, I really liked. M Train by Patti Smith. Open Water, that was a pretty popular literary fiction. Ghost by Dolly Alderton. Eric LaRocca and Melissa Broader. Melissa Broader, I totally understand being a recommendation for this. Let's look if we can find like one more list. Likewise, I used to use this app. Thank you. Similar books. Oh boy, that's wrong. Like, these books have absolutely nothing to do with Bunny. The thing about Likewise is that the idea is like you send out a post like, I would like a book or movie or TV show or a podcast that is like this thing, and actual people respond. So there's no sort of curation to figure out if it actually fits the bill. Let's see what Reddit has to say. The Secret History in the Dream House, I liked that book quite a bit. Boy Parts by Eliza Clark, again. A Touch of Jen, I've heard people hating that book. Catherine House, I've read and liked it. The Pisces by Melissa Broader. You Too Can Have a Body Like Mine. Rest of Relaxation. Orange World. Vampires in Living Road. I've not heard of those. Her Body and Other Parties, again. The Honeys by Ryan LaSala and Mary, An Awakening of Horror. I've really liked The Honeys. Mary, I've been interested. Night Bitch, hated. Milk Fed, loved. Big Swiss, we've seen that again. Mother Thing, loved. Shark Heart, I own that. I have that right here. I'm Thinking of Anything's correct. Why was nobody else talking about I'm Thinking of Anything's? I think those are really good comp titles. Now that I've seen what the internet has to say, I'm going to think about it and pick one of these books specifically. So I am going to be reading A Certain Hunger by Chelsea G. Summers for this. This is a book about a food critic who is just as obsessed with food as she is with sex, and she has been hiding that she has this other, more passionate desire, and that is, of course, to eat human flesh. This could creep me out. This could go over the top for me in a way that I don't like. We'll see. It's a satire of a lot of things, including foodie culture, which I'm a smidge of a foodie, so I can't wait to be taken down. I'm nervous and excited, and I am going to be listening to this on audiobook. And then the second way we're getting books is from Kayla herself. And I have had screenshots in my phone for years. I checked, going on 3 years, that are stacks of books that she has recommended in tandem with bunnies. There's one that I found, and I knew this was from her vlog where she read Catherine House a long time ago, which was her video of reading books that she was supposed to read in other vlogs that were canceled. I have since read Catherine House, and I gave it like a 3.5 star. I understand the comparison to Bunny completely. It just wasn't perfectly for me. And honestly, the only book that I have rated well that I've read from this stack is Bunny, so I don't think this is a good one to do. Follow Me to Ground, I gave a 2. Catherine House, I gave a 3.5. You Must Not Miss, I think I also gave a 2. I was not a big fan of those. Those are all books that feel disorienting like Bunny does, but none of them really worked in the way that I wanted them to. So then there was this other screenshot that I had. I could not find what video this was for the longest time to be able to give context on the stacks. I searched through vlogs, couldn't find anything forever. I eventually had to look through my YouTube history to find what I was watching on that day, and it turns out it was actually in a wrap-up. I should have known that from the location in which she is filming. This is from when she was reviewing A Certain Hunger in a wrap-up, and I'll let her talk about what she thought.
I can't explain to you why certain unhinged women books work for me and why some don't. Because I'm here for the idea of following a woman who is just like not in her right mind, but also you feel like good for her and the things that she's doing. And like these types of vibes where you as a reader don't know if what they're talking about is real, and having to follow them for so long when they don't even know if their reality is reality. Like that is so interesting to me. But then sometimes it just really just, it's not for me.
I have liked and disliked books in both stacks. In the good stack, I've read We Have Always Lived in the Castle. I think I gave it 3. My Heart is a Chainsaw, I did give it 2. I know that Stephen Graham Jones is not for me, unfortunately. Death in Her Hands by Natasha Moshfegh, I also gave like a 3.5. So the 2 remaining books in that stack were the Sarah Grand book and Her Body and Other Parties by Carmen Maria Machado, who is an author that I have read from and loved before. The no stack, which I'm not going to pull from, but I wanted to go through, had All's Well, which I've given a 5 star, The Vegetarian, which I gave a 4 star, Night Bitch, which I gave a 2 star, A Head Full of Ghosts, which I have not read, but I have read from Paul Tremblay and not liked it before, and then she has put A Certain Hunger on there, so I incidentally will be reading a book from each of her stacks. So yes, I will be reading Her Body and Other Parties by Carmen Maria Machado. This is a short story collection that says it kind of treads a lot of boundaries. It's been described to me as fiction or horror, so I think this will be interesting. It says that it blithely demolishes the borders between psychological realism and science fiction, comedy and horror, fantasy and fabulism. Here are 8 startling stories that map the realities of women's lives and the violence visited upon their bodies. I have loved this author's memoir, so I think that this is really going to work for me, and honestly, it's been a long time since I've read a short story collection, so I'm excited to give this a shot. And the last way I'm going to be getting books is from Mona Awad herself, and there were a couple of ways that I approached this before I came to an answer. First up, I was looking for books that inspired Bunny. She mostly mentions fairy tales and movies instead of books when she's talking about her inspiration for Bunny specifically. She has talked about David Mitchell being a large inspiration for her writing in general. I know Cloud Atlas should have been cited at least once. But when it came to Bunny, she is talking about fairy tales as well as cult classic movies, horror that has to do with girlhood, such as Heathers, which is one of my favorite movies of all time, The Craft, which I have never seen, and Carrie, which I have never seen, and you will note is a book that I haven't read. And if you've watched my must-reads of 2025 video, you know that that is actually on my must-reads. However, the reasons that Carrie is so similar is more about like the gory side of Bunny, and I was kind of looking for the dreamlike state in which Bunny was written. So I started to look for books that Mona Awad had recommended. And there was one that popped up more than any others. On one of her few reviews that she has on Goodreads, she gave it a 5-star. And she has said on multiple occasions that she taught this book in a creative writing class. She liked it so much. And that is Fever Dream by Samantha Schweblin. This is a short translated horror. I actually have read another book from this translator before, so that'll be interesting. I don't think I've ever read from a translator from 2 different original authors before. And this is about a woman and a boy who are both in the hospital, and they are not related to each other. The synopsis is pretty vague, and I'm excited for this to get weird. This is so perfect because this is exactly what I want from a Bunny recommendation. I have described Bunny so many times as feeling like a fever dream, so it's so appropriate that I read a book called Fever Dream. It is pretty short, which may mean it's not a total favorite of all time, but I am excited nonetheless. I really think that this is going to be a 5-star. So without further ado, let's get started. Who doesn't love a good bedside table update? I have just started A Certain Hunger. I've listened to more than an hour of the 10-hour audiobook or something. I think this is my second to last ever Audible book, but my family has switched over to Libro FM. This is not sponsored by them, but Libro FM is just such a great program. Profits go to whatever local indie bookstore you have. You can link it to any of them, and if you don't have a bookstore to link it to, they go to a general fund to support local bookstores, and your credits never expire either, which is great because we have that problem with Audible, and we're supporting a more ethical business model. Now that I'm off my soapbox, A Certain Hunger, I had kind of forgotten a couple of things that I knew about this book, but our main character, Dorothy, she was a food critic, and now we discover throughout the first chapter, she is actually in prison for a man that she killed and presumably ate. And she is writing this book from prison, and the book that you're holding in your hands is supposed to be a book that she published as a prisoner. I love when a book gets a little bit meta like that. The writing has been overly descriptive in a way that I think really fits the way that a food critic writes. Lush food that she's eating, or the sex that she's having, or the feeling she gets when she's killing somebody. It's almost vampiric, the way that things are being overly described and these different senses are kind of intermingling. It's interesting for sure. I am 100% getting the satire. It's been fun so far. We know that a court case is going to be coming up, and she's talking about how certain things would incriminate her later, which I think is interesting. I like some dramatic irony in my books. Just excited to see where it goes, but I'll see you when I have a little bit more to say. Okay, so I am, 70% of the way through A Certain Hunger. I haven't updated you earlier because I feel like this book is doing exactly what it says on the tin, exactly what I thought it was going to do. By the point that I've gotten to, she has already started eating people. She did not fully premeditate that this was something that she was going to be into, but she has diagnosed herself as being a psychopath, and she has gotten several tests, and she has been in prison that say that she is. I do wonder what people who are actually, diagnosed with psychopathy, a therapist or whatever would say about that, because I'm always a little bit hesitant about books that use real life mental illness conditions when talking about people who are are doing bad things. But I do understand that there is obviously a tie to psychopathy and people not having remorse for doing bad things to people. This is, for the most part, like a slasher horror that has long descriptions about food in it. I'm not put off by the writing. The horror is a little bit freaky. It's not so much that I don't want to continue on in the book. The way that like the food stuff is being talked about is done in a humorous way, if not so much a ha-ha funny. And I mentioned it before, but I do like the meta-narrative of sometimes the main character talking directly to the reader, knowing that a consumer is reading this book. I'm having an okay time. I'm just not feeling that strongly either way about it. There's nothing that I think it's really doing wrong. There's nothing that I'm thinking, oh my god, excellent, 5 million stars. I wanted to say, fun story, I was listening to the audiobook of this and I picked up some food on the way home. Literally the second I start to bite into my food, it gets into the eating people part and I was like, huh, nope, change. So I listened to the radio for the rest of the way home. I'm like, I can't do that while I'm eating chicken nuggets. I can't. Now I'm gonna feed myself some more and I will let you know when I have finished out the audiobook. Hello, I have finished A Certain Hunger, and I thought I'd update you before I go on my camping trip. My main takeaway from this book is that it did exactly what I thought it was going to do. Number one connection between this and Bunny is the unhinged women category. Women doing crazy things. Those things relating to men and having a sexual tinge to them. It being dark and these people doing dark things. Our main characters are both writers. The main difference between A Certain Hunger and Bunny to me is that in Bunny, Samantha is being drawn into something, and in A Certain Hunger, like the unhinged part is coming from our main character. Are they the same type of horror? I don't think so. There is gore in it, but I don't think it's like stylized in the same way. I understand the recommendation because they kind of come from similar places. I don't have a lot to say about this book itself. The narration in the audiobook was pretty good. I had a good time listening to it. There were a couple of descriptions that I was like, oh boy, that's bad. And there were some stuff that happened at the end where the main character's kind of talking about her own personal relationships and the ones that did actually matter to her that I thought were kind of interesting and weren't exactly what I would have written down if you had asked me what it was going to be. But overall, like, it just fulfilled the brief that I thought it was going to. I didn't really come away feeling strongly about anything. I liked the overdone writing and how it was being done to be overdone. So I'm probably gonna give this in the realm of 3. Not a new favorite, but that means we can move on to our next book, which is going to be Fever Dream, and I am going to be reading this on a little camping trip with my boyfriend. I have never been camping before at all. He has, ever since he got back from school, he has been wanting to do some more outdoorsy stuff because he's used to having like all of these hikes within driving distance of him, and so he's been finding more stuff to do, and there's a couple of campsites in the area that he lives in, so we're gonna be going to one of those, and car camping. I'm excited to do the hikes and everything, no idea what to expect of the camping, and I'm excited that he's excited. And I'll take you with me as I read Fever Dream.
Hello, it is the next morning and I have finished Fever Dream. It did not take me very long to read this at all. Y'all saw how big the print is. There's so few words on a page. Like, I knew this was a novella. I didn't think it was that short. For context, the audiobook is 3 hours and 13 minutes, which means that if this was printed in a normal font, it would probably have only been 100 pages. It had been a long time since I read the very vague synopsis of this book, and I kind of just went in knowing very little except that it is a conversation between a woman and a young boy who is not her son. Also, I would like to say, I had never noticed the freaking horse on this cover. I had only seen this book like online, so like a small picture of it, and from far enough away this kind of just looks like more of like a color ripple like the outside does. So I had never noticed this horse with creepy bulging eyes on it. Fun. But yes, of course that comes into play. There's dogs sticking their heads out of the car. It's cute. The entirety of this book is dialogue. It is this conversation between a woman who is barely conscious talking to a boy that she knows a little bit. And he is asking her to tell him about what happened to her because it ties into him. She starts talking about how she had a conversation with his mother, and the mother was telling her about like all this stuff that happened to him. It is very fast paced. There are no chapter breaks, and like it makes so much sense that it doesn't. The name Fever Dream is apt because it is literal. Like the main character is basically hallucinating. In the story that she's retelling, she is also like not entirely conscious of what's going on. I think it becomes apparent to the audience fairly quickly what sort of thing is going on here, but the whole point of the book is that the people involved aren't understanding that that's what's going on. There is a cycle of people continuing to not understand what's going on, even though we as the audience and eventually the main character does understand, and she sort of understands in retrospect. It's written fairly plainly, like the language is not what the big draw is, and I'm thinking of that because Mona Awad said she taught this in a creative writing class. It is about how it is structured, how this entire book can be a conversation, and how sometimes we're drifting backwards and forwards and our main character is so confused. It's more atmosphere and structure than it is about the specific language. I didn't really feel a tie between this and the other Megan McDowell translated book that I've read. I was just curious to see if I would be able to pull that out to feel like it is the same translator, but that means that she's doing her job if it does feel like two different authors. I think that this book did what it set out to do. I wasn't really sure what I was expecting it to do by the end of it, like while I was in the middle of it. I wasn't sure how much of it was going to explain. As its own singular short fiction piece, I think this is good. I am normally not a person who loves novellas. I usually want a little bit more from it, but I think that this was successful in doing exactly what it set out to do, in instilling horror in the reader and dread. And it's also a lot about parenting, the fear instilled in somebody when they are a parent and they are having to take care of their child, and what happens when like you mess up, because eventually something bad is going to happen, and just knowing that that inevitability is going to come eventually and there's nothing that you can do about it because everything bad possible could happen. There's that side of it, and there's the more global scale type thing, like the more universal side of things affecting more than just the mother and child. I think this is really solid. I 100% understand Mona Awad loving this. I think this is a 4-star for me. Like, this is definitely a book that I would recommend to people who like horror. This is a book I would recommend to people who want a book that they won't be able to put down because it is very conducive to maybe reading it in one sitting. I mean, I read it including me sleeping, I read it in less than 12 hours. Including me sleeping, I probably read this in 15 hours, like while doing other things. I don't know how much I'm going to think about it afterwards. It might be something that stays with me because of the nature of the horror here, but we'll have to see. We are packing up camping right now. Austin is currently packing up the tent while I slack off, but also I wouldn't be much help. This is all his camping gear. He's been very into wanting to do camping and stuff. He's a very outdoorsy, naturey person. You know, at school, he was in a place where there was so much hiking hiking to be done, like just within a very short drive. And he has been, now that he's back home, he's been trying to find all of the different hiking spots. So yesterday we did go on a hike and we ended up car camping. There's this little space where there's like a bathhouse over there, which I was very grateful for because I don't want to do full camping, especially for my very first time doing any type of camping. It was a little bit hard to like pitch up and everything with the gravel. We had a little fire going, we had some hot dogs and marshmallows, and had a very American time. And honestly, the tent is super nice. I think he got it for like $200. It's a Kelty tent, and it has a thing where you can like pull the hood up. So you can have like just the mesh out and you can like see the sky and everything. It's really nice. Very successful first attempt at car camping for me. Austin did the whole thing, but I had a lot of fun. So I'll probably hang out around here a little bit more before I do the 2-hour drive back home. But I will be starting on my next and final book when I do get home.
Hello. It is the evening. Just putting some moisturizer on my face. I have had a bit of a busy day. Well, work was slow because our technical manuals are down, so I can't do freaking anything at my job. My day at home, I spent a lot of it doing chores. I was able to film a video just before it started raining, so happy about that. Got that off my plate. And then I spent a lot of my evening working on making a trivia game for my friends. I made a set of trivia questions that's based on the UK game show Pointless, which is like the opposite of Family Feud, and it's been fun. We're going to do over Discord PowerPoint night where I present all the winners and everything. I have been having such dry skin lately. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's because I'm getting older and I'm living in a relatively new place to me. I had to put stuff all over my face and my legs. Like usually I just had dry skin on my hands, but now it's on my face and my legs and it's unbearable. Let me blend the moisturizer in before I get grease on the pages of the book. But I have read the first 3 stories in Her Body and Other Parties. A lot of this book, as one can imagine from kind of the cover and the title, is about women and sexuality and how that ties into identity and that sort of thing. This is a short story collection of 8 stories, and I read the first 3, which are all under like 35 pages. The first one was called The Husband Stitch, which I didn't remember what that was referencing until halfway through and I cringed because nasty. But that one was interesting because it was inspired by like creepy folk stories that mostly like millennials to like people my age might know. The main one being The Girl with the Green Ribbon, which is what the green ribbon on the cover is. Wildly, it had a reference to Mandor Hand Hook Cardor. If you don't know what I'm talking about, it's like a parody of a creepypasta that's so poorly written as to be indecipherable, like old internet lore. That one I really liked because it was sort of about the same things as The Girl with the Green Ribbon of like, no matter how perfect you are, men don't want you to have like anything for yourself. Every once in a while, there'll be a little insert where the narrator will say, if you're reading the story out loud, read it like this, and like give you sound effects to do or something. Shake a bottle with like beans in it, and sometimes it's ask someone for their deepest secret and shout it out into the streets. So I think that that's just super duper creative. The second story was Inventory. Some of the content in the story felt very similar to the first story, so it was like interesting that those two were put right next to each other. But it is told in paragraphs. In each paragraph it says like one man or one woman, and it'll describe someone that the main character had some sort of romantic or sexual encounter with over the course of her life. And slowly you realize that there is a pandemic going on. And it is very interesting to read pandemic fiction that was written pre-pandemic. I think that it was interesting that it kind of used sex or like attraction to somebody, of like the physical connection that you have with another person being a staple, something that is present even in those sort of dire situations. I thought that it was really interesting the way that it slowly became a speculative story. And then the story Mothers was a little bit longer and definitely reminded me of the author's memoir in the Dream House, which is mostly about a previous relationship of the author's. This is about two women who end up having a baby together biologically on accident. The former partner ends up leaving the baby with the main character, and she's sort of having to deal with motherhood and also describing the nature of the relationship she had with that woman. I really love Carmen Maria Machado's writing style. I think all three of the stories that I've read so far have very similar writing styles, if not structures. She loves to list things and just giving you a string of different objects to create an emotion. And I understand the tone of this and how things are tinged with like a bit of a sexual energy being tied to Bunny.
So I have read the next 3 stories in Her Body and Other Parties, the longest of which is a novella. It's like 60 pages long that was published before this collection came out, called Especially Heinous. And it is told as if they are synopses of SVU episodes. Each paragraph will begin with the title of a real SVU episode, and then it'll give as if like a synopsis or a snippet from the episode. Let me get in front of the light. The first episode, it does basically the synopsis of the first episode of SVU, and then weirder and weirder things start happening. I think I saw somebody compare it to if SVU was Lovecraftian. Personally, I didn't get a lot out of that one. At first I was like, well, are these just parts of SVU episodes? Was this like a big research project into SVU? And then it turns out ghosts start appearing, and I'm like, I feel like I would know if there were ghosts in SVU. The way that it's written feels vaguely X-Files to me, but more on the horror side. Personally, that one just didn't do a lot for me. Each of these is a very short snippet of an idea. Some things come back. I think if I was a fan of SVU, I might have gotten something more out of that. The next one is called Real Women Have Bodies. A woman who works in a dress shop when there is a phenomenon where women start becoming incorporeal. Not all women, they slowly just disappear. That one didn't really stand out to me either. I feel like I get some of what it was going for, but I didn't fully just pull everything that I could have. And the last one that I read was called 8 Bites, and it is about a woman who is deciding to go through with a weight loss surgery after all of her sisters have done it. It's talking about like your relationship with your own body, and that one I thought was very good. I was upset while reading it about the way that this woman perceives her own body. Like her daughter is trying to talk her out of it and talking about like, okay, if you see yourself that way, I look like you. And I think just that inability to see your own body for what it is, and also the influences from the outside of how women's bodies are policed, it resonated with me, and I was like, oh man, I might have to take a break from reading this one. That was the best of those 3, so I still have 2 left to go. One of them is like 50 pages and the other one is like 25. So I'll get on that and we can close out the vlog.
Hi, trying a different angle, but I have finished Her Body and Other Parties, and therefore I have finished out the reading for this vlog. I told you about 8 Bites, so the last 2 stories in here, one of them is called The Resident, and the other is Difficult at Parties, which is interesting because in The Resident, a character says to another that they must be difficult at parties. It's really fascinating reading someone's fiction after you have read their memoir, and you can kind of see where things from real life seem to have bled through into fiction. I would bet money that there was a mention of the author being called Difficult at Parties in the Dream House. Somebody can correct me. I swear to God it's there. The Resident is the second longest story in here. It might be by word count. It isn't by page count because of the way that the SVU one is structured. Also, back on the SVU one, I said earlier that it was like if the X-Files and SVU were together. I think it might be more accurate if you did Twin Peaks and SVU. I haven't seen Twin Peaks, so maybe that's not right. But The Resident is about a woman who is a writer. She is trying to write her first novel, and she is invited to be a resident at this like old manor house on this mountain where she actually went as a Girl Scout when she was a kid. And it is like an artist's retreat where people come in and out and everybody's doing their own little art. And she is just struggling to get her words out, and she almost isn't really realizing how weird the things that are happening are. The main thing is that she seems to be very ill, and this main character is sort of confronting things about her past while she is up there so that she can write her story. That is the story in here that I feel like could have been a full novel, or maybe like, 100-page novella or something like that. And honestly, I could have used a little bit more of a resolution. The last story is Difficult at Parties, and it is about a woman who has experienced assault and the effects that it has had on her. There was a lot of depersonalization and struggling to feel yourself in your own body. And that just was a very tangible feeling. This book is centering discussions about women's bodies and sexuality and how women use their bodies, and very often they are used by other people. The emotions coming off of it was mostly what I got out of it. I read very few short story collections. I'll probably read like max 2 a year. Usually when I read a short story collection, there's a story that's 5, there's a story that's a 2, and there's some in between. But for this, almost every single story in here, I would give a 4-star. I think the writing is really strong. I think I wanted more time to sit with any one thing. I believe every story in here is speculative, and I did talk earlier about how this is sometimes shelved in fiction, sometimes shelved in horror. Every single one of these stories has a horror element, so it's not like a mix of genres of each of the stories is like a different genre. It's that all of the stories are like real life with a horror element, which is something I get along with quite well. The Husband Stitch and 8 Bites were probably my favorites in this. I think that this is a very strong short story collection. What does it have to do with Bunny? We're talking about creativity. I think that some of the horror elements may feel similar. The tone here is the thing that I think ties into Bunny the best, and how these characters don't necessarily know what's going on. They're normal people being thrown into a horror-y situation, and they are disoriented within that. And that's the big Bunny pull here. I think both Her Body and Other Parties and Fever Dream, they have a dream-like uncertain quality to the writing. The character is often separate from themselves. I think that both of these are good pulls in that way. Versus A Certain Hunger, I think it's mostly because it is in, quote, the unhinged women category. It has gore in it like Bunny does. I don't think it's being used in the same way, and it certainly isn't affecting our main character in the same way in either of them. They're both a bit campy in one way or the other, both satirical, but from different perspectives. Like Bunny is very much from the outsider perspective, the loner type character who is being brought in by these people who are doing things. So I am going to be giving A Certain Hunger probably a 3-star. I'm going to be giving Her Body and Other Parties a 4, and I think I'm also going to be giving a 4 to Fever Dream. I see why all of these are Bunny related books, and I'm glad that I knocked them off of my TBR. And yes, I am very aware that later this year there is going to be a sequel to Bunny. It is called We Love You, Bunny. And as a huge fan of the first book, I'm nervous. I am a huge fan of the ambiguous ending. I think it leaves exactly the right amount to the imagination of the reader, and it's really messing with me. Have I heard that it's a prequel? I'm not sure. Is it a prequel? I'm under the impression that it has to do more with the bunnies than it does with Samantha, which might be a good thing. I'm still gonna do it. I'm gonna do it. I'm just really worried that it's going to jump the shark, because it's already to me like a perfect entity. It does not need to be expanded upon because everything that needed to be there is there. Anyways, thank you so much for watching, Bunny. I would love to know if you have read any of these books. If you've read Bunny, are there any other books that you would recommend I read based on them? Some books that feel like Bunny to me: Chlorine by Jade Song, The Writing Retreat, Dowry of Blood, The Death of Jane Lawrence. If you want to be best friends forever, you can find find me at the links in the description. And if you'd like to watch more of my videos, you can hit that subscribe button. And as always, I'll see you in the next one, bunny.